Wendigo. Wendigo.
Hey, back up! Back up! Unit A-19, what's your status? Copy? Need backup?
The first officer on the stop never saw her hands until it was too late. The minivan's cabin light flicked on, and two faces in the back didn't blink. If you want the truth before the lights go out, hit like and subscribe and stay with this case. The file opened with dashcam timecode, 2:17 a.m., State Route 19 outside Briar Hollow, Tennessee. Patrol Officer Grant Keller had pulled over a dull gray Dodge Caravan for drifting and a broken tail light. The night was clean and still, the kind that made radio static sound like breathing. He approached on the passenger side. The driver, a woman in a thrift store parka, smiled too wide for the temperature. Her eyes tracked Keller's flashlight the way a cat tracks a laser. She said her name was Mara Ellison, voice steady, too rehearsed. Keller asked for license and registration. She gave neither. Instead, she leaned forward as if listening to something behind the glass. Keller noted it in his report. Subject appeared distracted, possibly impaired, no odor of alcohol. Then the beam hit the second row. There were blankets piled like luggage. Under one blanket, a foot angled wrong, socked, stiff, pale. Under another, a forearm with a thin bracelet and a wedding band. No blood, no movement. The smell was faint, masked by cheap vanilla spray. Keller's pulse spiked and his training took over. Hand went to his radio, step back, keep her talking, call for backup. He didn't get past the first syllable. Mara Ellison opened the door and launched herself out of the seat, low and fast. Witnesses later said pounced, like she was spring-loaded. Keller stumbled backward, boots skidding on gravel. She hit his chest and stayed there, clinging with a grip that didn't match her size. Her fingernails were long, packed with road grit. She tried to bite his throat, jaw working like she was chewing through a strap. Keller drove his forearm up and caught her teeth on his sleeve, felt the pressure, the frantic determination. She didn't scream. She whispered through clenched teeth over and over. Wendigo, Wendigo, I'm Wendigo. Dispatch logged Keller's open mic. Grunts, a strangled warning, then a second voice. Officer Tessa Lang arrived in under 3 minutes. Hard stop, door open, taser out. 2 probes snapped into Mara's jacket. Her body locked and shook, but even on the pavement she fought like an animal cornered by headlights. When the cuffs clicked, she laughed, dry, broken, and kept whispering the same word. Inside the minivan, Lang found 2 bodies and a third person barely warm, wedged behind a cooler. The survivor's name was later redacted, but their statement started the same way as Keller's. She said she was saving me. At 3:06 a.m., Mara Ellison sat in interview room B, wrapped in a silver thermal blanket, skin chapped, hair matted. Without the grime, she looked ordinary, too ordinary for what the scene suggested. Detective Nolan Price slid a folder across the table. On top was a photo from the stop, Mara's smile, frozen by flash as if it belonged to someone else. He asked one question, careful and procedural. Mara, why were there people in your van? She tilted her head, listening again. Then she answered like she'd been waiting for the prompt. Because they were food, she said softly. And because I'm not done yet. Price didn't flinch, but his pen stopped moving. The next entry in the case file was the search inventory. Every item was tagged, photographed, and bagged at the impound lot because Nolan Price didn't trust first impressions, and the scene begged for one. The minivan held more than blankets. In the center console, a prepaid phone with the battery removed. Under the driver's seat, a folding knife dulled by overuse, no visible gore, just metal wiped clean. In a grocery bag. Protein shakes, mint tea, and a pharmacy receipt from a place 30 miles away. Normal purchases, normal handwriting, normal life. That normality made everyone tense. Price watched Mara through the one-way glass while the medic cleared her for questioning. She sat still, eyes open too wide, lips moving without sound. When the nurse asked if she knew where she was, Mara answered perfectly. County Station, she said, room B. When Price stepped in, he didn't lead with monsters, he led with time. Where were you coming from tonight? From the river pull-off, she said. I got lost. That's why you stopped me. Those people in your van, Price said, keeping his voice flat. Did you know them? Not their names, she murmured. Names don't matter after. He tried a standard path. Are you part of a group? Anyone helping you? Mara's gaze slid to the ceiling corner. They don't help, she whispered. They watch. The team outside took that as the first misdirection. A watcher sounded like a handler, trafficking, a cult, a crew using her as a lure. The bodies could be overdoses, collateral, something that fit a familiar box. Price didn't buy it, not fully. The victims weren't dumped, they were arranged, blankets tucked, a bottle of water by the survivor. A pair of socks folded on a duffel like an apology. He pivoted to what he could prove. Why keep them covered? Mara met his eyes. Her pupils were huge in the fluorescent light. Because cold is respectful, she said. Cold keeps you quiet, forensics ran the prints. The van was registered to Mara Ellison in Cedar Grove, Kentucky. Plates current, no warrants, no history, a clean life on paper. The prepaid phone was dead-end, too. No contacts saved, just one handwritten number on a scrap of receipt paper. Price had it traced. It led to an old voicemail box tied to a defunct outdoor store, disconnected for years. Someone wanted to look present without being present. The pharmacy receipt became the first hard clue. It listed cold medicine, sleep aids, and a prescription for an appetite suppressant, filled under a different name. The clerk remembered Mara because she'd asked an odd question. "Do you sell deer meat?" she'd said. "Not jerky, the real kind." Price stared at the paper and felt the case tilt. Appetite suppressants, sleep aids, deer meat. A person trying to control something inside her. He requested missing person overlays for every town within 2 hours. By dawn, the list came back longer than he expected. 3 disappearances in 6 weeks, adults. Last seen near roads, gas stations, trailheads. One of them, the bracelet on the forearm in the van, matched a photo from a flyer. Price flipped the folder closed and looked at the dashcam timestamp again. 2:17 a.m. Keller had stopped her by accident. If the tail light hadn't been out, Mara Ellison would have driven past every camera and kept going. Lang's note was underlined twice. Victim number 3 survived and says she wasn't the first. The survivor's interview was sealed, but the summary made it into the detective's working notes. They called her Witness C to keep her alive long enough to testify. Witness C said Mara had picked her up at a gas station outside Ashford, claiming the highway was closed and offering a ride before the cold got teeth. Mara spoke gently, like a nurse on a night shift. She offered water. She offered a blanket. She never raised her voice. Then on a back road, Mara pulled over and said, "Don't move." Witness C saw the second row blankets. She saw the shape under them. She tried to open the door, but the child lock clicked uselessly. Mara didn't threaten her with a weapon. She just smiled and said, "You're safe. You're not ready yet. Not ready." Again, the case kept circling that word. Price took the statement and did what he always did when a suspect sounded scripted. He went looking for the script. Cedar Grove, Kentucky was 2 hours north. Mara Ellison's address led to a rental duplex on a quiet street with Christmas lights still hanging in windows. The landlord swore she was quiet, polite, paid early. No visitors, no fights. Inside Mara's unit, evidence techs found the opposite of chaos. The place smelled like lemon. The fridge held vegetables, yogurt, bottled water. The freezer held only ice, no trophies. It looked like someone had staged normal and over-delivered. The first real crack was in the bedroom closet, a shoebox taped shut, labeled in neat block letters, "Night." Inside were printed pages, disappearances, folklore essays, screenshots of late-night forums discussing Wendigo signs, thinness, insomnia, voices in the dark, hunger that doesn't feel like hunger. Some posts read like horror fan fiction. Others read like a support group that had lost its grip on reality. Price checked the browser history pulled from Mara's laptop. Months of searches, all variations of the same question. What am I if I don't feel full? Can a person become a Wendigo? How to stop craving human? The wording shifted over time from curiosity to certainty. A notebook sat beside the laptop, black cover, no brand. The entries weren't drawings or spells. They were logistics, routes, dates, times. Trailhead Thursday, truck stop after midnight. Avoid cameras at mile 12. Along the margin, one phrase repeated like a mantra, keep IT quiet. Keep it cold. Price compared the routes to the missing person reports. The overlap was clean and brutal. Mara hadn't hunted randomly. She'd built a pipeline, choosing places where loneliness was normal and cameras were optional. He asked digital forensics to work backward from the prepaid phone. They found something subtle. The battery removal wasn't only paranoia, it was ritual. The same phone model appeared in a forum photo, burner for the change, the caption read. Then beneath the printouts, Price found a folded storage unit contract. Unit 44 billion, paid cash, location, Briar Hollow Storage and Marine. He didn't tell the team right away. He told Officer Lang. Lang looked at him, jaw tight. "Are we walking into her pantry?" she asked. Price didn't answer. He just grabbed his coat and the warrant because the file was about to stop being paper. Unit 44 billion sat at the far edge of Briar Hollow Storage and Marine, where the floodlights didn't quite reach. The roll-up door was painted a tired blue. The padlock was new. Price read the warrant aloud anyway, habit, protocol, and a quiet way to slow his own breathing. Officer Lang stood to his left, fingers flexing like she could still feel Mara's nails. The bolt cutters snapped. The door groaned up. The smell inside wasn't rot. It was chemicals, bleach, air freshener, cold metal. A battery lantern sat on a folding table already set up as if Mara wanted the light just right, on the shelves. Duct tape, zip ties, clean towels, plastic sheeting, a camping stove still in its box. In the back corner, 2 coolers sealed with fresh tape. Evidence techs photographed everything before touching it because the unit felt like a checklist. Price's mind chased the obvious narrative: organized offender, premeditation, a kit. That storyline had a comfortable shape, which made it dangerous. Then they opened the first cooler. There was no spectacle, just weight and silence. The contents were wrapped, layered with ice packs, labeled with dates in black marker: a ring, a driver's license, a hospital wristband. The items that said without words, these were real people with real timelines. Lang turned away and swallowed hard. She wasn't squeamish, she was furious. She cataloged them, she muttered, like that was the worst part. In the second cooler they found empty ice packs and a single laminated map of county roads. Red dots marked pull-offs, trailheads, and 2 gas stations. One dot was circled twice. Under it a note: next. Price stared at that circle longer than he should have. The case was no longer about what had happened. It was about what would have happened if a tail light hadn't failed. A cardboard box held an old digital voice recorder. The date on the last file matched the night of the stop. Price played it in the unit, low volume. Mara's voice filled the dark, calm and intimate. "It starts like snow in your mouth," she said. "You eat and you don't feel it. You sleep and you wake up starving. Then the videos make sense, the stories make sense. You realize you've been chosen." Her words weren't a confession of murder. They were a self-diagnosis built from folklore and late-night rabbit holes. She talked about the cold telling the truth, about meat that isn't dead. It was also a timeline. She mentioned 2018, when she stopped eating with friends because their food smelled wrong. She mentioned a job loss. A winter she spent in her car because apartments felt too warm. Price paused the recorder and looked at Lang. "This isn't a group," he said. "This is a person building a myth to survive being herself." Lang didn't look relieved. "And the myth made her brave," she said. Back at the station, Price ran the map dots against traffic cameras. He verified 2 stops on Mara's notebook routes with toll footage and gas receipts. The pattern held. She moved like a delivery driver, efficient, repeatable, hidden in the ordinary. Then a fresh report hit his desk, filed at 11:42 p.m. the previous night. A college kid last seen at a rest area, the same rest area as the circled dot. The name matched a name written on the storage unit map beside next. Price felt his stomach drop. The stop hadn't ended the case. It had only cut in line. The task force treated the next name like a ticking device. Patrol units hit the rest area before sunrise. K-9 teams swept the tree line. Troopers checked every vehicle heading north. They found the kid's car first, parked crooked, driver's door half-latched. No signs of a struggle, no blood, just a phone on the seat with a notification stuck mid-sentence. "I'm just grabbing coffee, I'll be right." It was the kind of scene that could mean anything, which made it worse. Price pulled the rest area cameras. The footage was grainy, winter fog smearing the frame. At 10:38 p.m., the missing kid walked into view, hoodie up, backpack on. At 10:41, Mara's gray minivan rolled in and parked 2 spaces away. Price watched Mara step out. She moved slow, careful, like someone trying not to startle a deer. The kid hesitated, then got into the passenger seat. That should have been the whole story. It wasn't. At 10:44, another car entered the lot, a black sedan with its headlights off until the last second. It stopped behind the minivan, blocking the cameras for 8 long seconds. When the sedan moved again, the minivan was already pulling out. Misdirection hit the room like a slap, a partner, a blocker, someone covering angles. Price ran the sedan's plate through DMV. It came back clean, registered to a retired schoolteacher in Knoxville. No record, current insurance, the kind of plate you'd choose if you wanted to blend. He sent Lang and a trooper to the address. The schoolteacher answered in slippers and produced his keys. The black sedan was in his garage, dusty, unmoved for months. He'd been in the hospital for knee surgery the week Mara drove through. A cloned plate then, or a stolen one. The case kept offering teams and handlers, and every time the thread dissolved into something smaller and uglier. A single person improvising. Price returned to interview room B. Mara had eaten half a granola bar and lined the wrapper edges into a neat rectangle. When he sat, she looked at him with patient expectation, like he was late for an appointment. "You went back," she said. "To the rest area," Price replied. Mara nodded. "Cold places are easier," she said. "People don't ask questions when they're cold." "Where is he?" Price asked. Her smile faded. "He isn't a he to me," she said. "He's a meal that's not ready." Price kept his voice even. "You're saying he's alive." "I don't waste," Mara whispered. "Waste is evil." Price slid the storage unit map onto the table. "Why right next?" Mara stared at the paper, then at the ceiling corner. "Because the hunger schedules you," she said. "It's not random, it's like payroll. You either pay it or it takes interest." Price pushed. "What changed in 2018? Mara's fingers twitched. "That was when the warm food stopped working," she said. "That was when I learned the name." "From where?" Price asked. Mara's eyes dropped to his. "From a man on the phone," she said. He told me what I was. Price held still. A man on the prepaid phone, she nodded. He listened. He didn't laugh. He said the hunger had rules. Price left the room and pulled the trace report again, the dead voicemail box tied to the defunct outdoor store. Then he noticed what he'd missed. The voicemail greeting had been updated 2 weeks ago. Someone had accessed it recently. Someone was still talking to Mara. The voicemail box wasn't dead. It was dormant, waiting for the right person to remember it existed. Price pulled the audio file from the carrier. The greeting was short, male, and careful, like someone reading a script through a smile. You've reached Cedar Line Outfitters. Leave your name and number and we'll call you back. Cedar Line Outfitters had closed years ago, but the number hadn't been disconnected. It had been recycled into a virtual line routed through an app. Digital forensics subpoenaed the routing records. By late afternoon they had a name, Dr. Eli Mercer, a private counselor in Kentucky who treated identity disturbance and compulsive beliefs. Mercer's site was full of calming stock photos and soft promises. No mention of monsters, no mention of folklore. Price drove to the office. The receptionist's smile collapsed when he said Mara Ellison. She was a client, the woman admitted, not recently. And Dr. Mercer is unavailable. Unavailable how? Price asked. He's missing. Mercer had vanished 17 days earlier. Adult, no signs of violence, presumed voluntary, the kind of report that sits. Price read the deputy's note, office tidy. Laptop gone, phone gone, no forced entry, tidy, like Mara's duplex, like her storage unit, like someone who believed order could erase consequences. Price checked call logs tied to the voicemail line. Mara had called it dozens of times, always from different sources, payphones, library landlines, a church office phone. No pattern except obsession. But the most recent call 2 weeks ago had been answered, not recorded. 6 minutes. Someone had talked to her, recently, after Mercer disappeared. Misdirection snapped back into place with new teeth. If Mercer had been her man on the phone, then he wasn't just a counselor. He was a facilitator or a victim, or both. Price found one clue in Mercer's backed-up calendar, a recurring entry labeled Cold Work Audio with attachments. They weren't therapy notes, they were recordings, a man describing rules of the hunger, how the chosen survive, how warmth lies and cold tells the truth. Folklore packaged as guidance, a podcast pretending to be prophecy. The metadata tag read E.M. Mercer's initials, but the voice wasn't Mercer's. Price ran the audio through an ID service. A match came back fast, Emerson Madsen, a former paranormal host who used to run Cryptid Council live streams. He'd vanished from the public internet, but not from the business of feeding belief. While the team chased Madsen's last known addresses, Price chased the kid. Toll cameras placed Mara's van crossing the county line at 10:57 p.m., headed toward the reservoir, the same river pull-off she'd named the first night. Search units moved in a grid. At dusk, they found tire tracks cutting off a service road and into a stand of pines. A small hunting cabin waited there, lights off, door latched. Price entered first, weapon raised, pulse loud in his ears. Inside, the air was cold enough to sting. A space heater sat unplugged on purpose. On the table, bottled water, crackers, and a handwritten note. Don't be afraid, you're safe until you're ready. In the corner, alive, shivering, eyes wide, the kid from the report. Then headlights swept across the cabin wall. A man's silhouette crossed the window, slow and unhurried, as if he owned the night. The silhouette didn't rush the door. It paused, letting the cabin's thin curtains broadcast its patience. Price killed the light and signaled the flank. Lang moved first, steady and hard. The rescued kid stayed in the corner, staring at the window like fear could nail it shut. A voice came through the wood, friendly and rehearsed. You don't have to do this, I'm here to help her. Price yanked the door open. A tall man in his mid-40s stood on the porch, beard trimmed to look trustworthy, hands lifted a second too late. His trunk was open behind him, phone, tripod, ring light, and a tote bag like props for an explainer. Emerson Madsen, Price said. The man smiled, pleased to be named. Detective. Finally, Lang cuffed him before he could talk himself into control. Even then, Madsen kept looking for angles, like the night itself was a camera. Price didn't waste time. You updated the Cedar Line voicemail. You took her calls. You fed her rules. I told stories, Madsen replied, calm, professional. People want frameworks. That isn't a felony. 2 bodies in a van disagree, Lang snapped. Madsen shrugged. I never ordered her to hurt anyone. I told her she wasn't alone. Your system leaves people alone. Price slid a tablet photo across. Dr. Eli Mercer's missing person report. Where is Mercer? Madsen's smile thinned. He got scared, he said. He wanted to shut it down. Did you make him disappear? Price asked. Madsen's jaw flexed. He didn't understand what he was hosting, he muttered. He thought it was therapy. It was a hotline. They searched him. 1 burner phone. A keycard, a folded note with a motel name outside Briar Hollow. Deputies hit the motel within the hour. Room 214 was empty, but the sink was wet, and a space heater sat unplugged like a warning. In the closet, they found Dr. Mercer alive, weak, chilled, and shaking, kept cold, kept quiet, kept contained. He couldn't look at the officers without crying. Back at the station, Mara Ellison heard the man on the phone was in custody. For the first time, her certainty cracked. She leaned forward, eyes bright. "Did he say I was wrong?" she asked. Price kept his voice flat. "He said he sold you stories. He said he profited." Mara stared at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. "Then the rules weren't real," she whispered. "That's what the psychiatrists will testify," Price said. "A delusion you built into an identity, no monster. Just a belief that turned into a method." Silence stretched. The HVAC kicked on. Mara finally asked, almost gently, "If I'm not a Wendigo, then who am I?" Price didn't have a clean answer. He had charges, evidence. A future shaped by court dates and evaluations, and a community that would need to notice the next person before a myth gave them permission. Officer Keller's injuries were minor on paper and loud in his nightmares. Lang wrote use of force justified and still replayed the stop every time she heard gravel under tires. Witness C refused interviews, but her statement held. Mara had sounded kind. The case file closed with one sentence underlined in red: "Belief can be a weapon." If you want more cases like this, hit like and subscribe and tell me in the comments. Was Mara a predator or a victim who learned the wrong story?